aha Ghanatube so modofo snowy masan so atenase ensem ahodo a ekoso ewo omega ni mu no onsa beka ebusiafo matenase se no makwakoje emwa bebre de apa na entempa no ye hakotie nia ekoso ewo omani ne ba ebusiafo me demo atoaso.
We're glad to be joined by the Consul General of the U.S. Embassy in Ghana. That's Elliot Fettig, who's joined us this morning. Good morning, Elliot, and thank you very much for making time to be with us here on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM.
Good morning.
Great, and I believe you're doing very well?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's get into it and, find out what the new guidelines or requirements for applicants of F, M, and J visas are in light of the resumption.
Sure. So, under current policy, we obviously engage in media events for all applicants. And under the new policy, I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Under the new policy, we are engaged in enhanced vetting of the social media and online presence of all student visa applicants. And that's why we are telling student visa applicants that they must set their social media profiles to public before they come in for their interview. Other than that, the process is mostly still the same. You still have the interview. The officer will ask the applicant questions about their study plans and how they're going to pay for it, and then the officer will make their decision.
I mean, I'm just curious. Why do you want to scan their social media handles? Why do you want to know what they've been posting on social media?
Whenever we consider a person's eligibility for a visa, we look at the entire picture. We look at what they present to us, but we also look online. And sometimes there's information there that is important for our decision. And that is this change, this process is simply a way of enhancing our ability to see whether or not an applicant qualifies for the visa, and whether to make sure that there is nothing in their background that would prohibit them from entering the United States.
And that would lead me to what could be in their background that could be found on social media that could prohibit them from entering the United States.
Well, there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of things we consider. Obviously, we want to make sure that the person who is coming to the United States is going to obey the terms of the visa for which they are eligible. And we also want to make sure there's nothing in their background, like a criminal history or something like that, that would impact their eligibility for a visa. As I said, I know that the vast majority of Ghanaians are interested in traveling to the United States and want to peacefully obey the law and obey our rules. These social media vetting is not aimed at them. This is aimed at the certain minority who do not follow the rules or otherwise are not eligible for a visa.
And this social media vetting, is it for just students or is it for all applicants to the USA?
We reserve the right to engage in social media vetting for any visa applicant. However, under the current administration, we are focusing in particular on social media vetting for students.
Okay. Interesting. So finally on the social media vetting. So for instance, if in the past had made comments that are deemed to be unfavorable to the United States, we know the United States may have been engaged in a lot of things in the world, and if I'd made any comments, if I'd supported those who are deemed unfriendly to the United States, does that in any way affect me?
It could. I mean, every case is individual. And I can't comment on, well, what if this, what does that mean? If someone says one thing, what does that mean? Because we take into account the whole circumstances. And, and obviously there are some things that would be a deal breaker, like having a criminal background or making it clear that you're not going to abide by the terms of your visa in the United States. But I think for most people, this is just a way of enhancing our screening and vetting. And as I said, if your intent is to obey the law and to abide by the terms of the visa, this will not be a problem for you.
Talking about, obeying the terms of the visa would take me to, persons who probably may have overstayed following they're being granted a visa. Could you tell us, for instance, the consequences of overstaying and how it affects future travel eligibility?
Sure. So people who overstay or otherwise do not abide by the terms of the visa can face a significant range of penalties. It could impact their future eligibility for a visa. It could incur a penalty of not being able to enter the United States for a certain period of time, up to and including life. And they could even be subject to civil or criminal prosecution if they've engaged in criminal activity or fraud. So, and perhaps worst of all, they make it harder for ordinary law-abiding Ghanaians to get visas in the future. And again, just to be clear, this is not new. These penalties and these consequences have been there as long as I've been a consular officer, and that's longer than I care to admit. So this is not new. This has always been there as telling people, follow the rules, obey the law, and then you will not have any problems.
Great. This one we've been joined by Elliot Fertig, who is Consul General, U.S. Embassy in Ghana. But let's look at something. I mean, there are persons who have, people fixing interviews for them, and, people, they are visa consultants. For those persons, for instance, who use these visa consultants or fixers, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I would say that in general, the visa application process is something that you can do by yourself. It is outlined how to do it on our website, and there are also on the website phone numbers and email addresses that you can use if you run into difficulties. But what I would say in particular to look out for is visa fixers or visa brokers who claim that they have some sort of influence over the process, and they demand thousands of dollars, and they say they can guarantee you the visa, where they know someone on the inside. Let me be clear. They are lying. They are ripping you off. And I cannot tell you how many sad stories we hear of people coming to us saying, I paid thousands of dollars and I didn't end up getting the visa. Or, there's even people who claim that you can just mail in your passport and get a visa without even having an interview, and without going through the visa interview waiver process. So, if you have a question about the legitimacy of a process, it's probably not legitimate.
Okay, so in that case, how should applicants prepare for the visa interview, and what should they expect during that interview?
Great question, and I'm glad to talk a little bit about how people can better prepare for the visa interview. So it obviously varies depending upon the type of visa you are interviewing for. So, for example, students have additional requirements that are not there for tourist visas. But I would say in general, what you should keep in mind is that during most interviews, they are short, and the officer makes their decision based on what you say during the interviews, not whatever documents you bring. So, for example, if you are applying for a tourist visa, you might get asked, what do you do for a living here in Ghana? Have you ever traveled outside of the United States before? I'm sorry, I've traveled outside of Ghana before. And why do you want to go to the United States? I would say that if you should be ready to answer those questions. And if you're a student, you'll be asked about your study plans. You'll be asked about how you're going to pay for your education, because I can tell you, education is not cheap in the United States. I know I'm having one of my kids go off to college just this fall. And so you need to be ready to answer those questions, and then the officer will make the decision.
Okay. But talking about that, talking about the fact that your success depends on what you say, there are those who believe that the high denial rate is a deliberate way of shutting your doors, particularly to Ghanaians. How do you respond to that?
I say that each visa application is decided individually. When an officer sees an applicant come up to the window, they have no idea how they're going to decide, and they decide it based on the questions to their answers and any other information that becomes available during the interview. There are no quotas. There's no decisions ahead of time who will get visas and who will not. It is based on the individual merits of the case.
But I look at the fact that last year, of the over 60,000 applicants, 25,000, about say 40, less than 50%, got visas. That is a high denial rate. So how do you convince me that there isn't, the possibility of denying, or there isn't some kind of a scheme to deny these people the chance of going to the United States?
As I said, each case is decided individually. And while many cases are denied, there are also plenty that are also granted. And there are many, many Ghanaians who have a wonderful experience going on a short trip to the United States or coming to work and study in the United States. It isn't a scheme. It is a way in which we try to give every visa applicant a fair chance of showing that they are eligible for the visa. Now, the requirements are strict. We do absolutely look very carefully at each individual applicant to make sure that they are qualified and they do not pose any problem for the United States.
Okay.
But if you abide by the rules, we welcome you in the United States.
Now, is there a quota of visa giving to countries?
On non-immigrant visas, no. And I just say that because there are some categories of immigrant visas that do have quota limits for each individual country. But for non-immigrant visas, tourist visas, student visas, there are no quotas. It is just decided purely on each individual case.
Okay. Finally, Elliot, there are concerns about the system of making payments before securing an interview appointment, which is limited. Is it possible to make payment after getting the appointment?
Unfortunately not. And the reason is that under U.S. law, the American government has to collect the cost of processing a visa application in each case. By law, we cannot charge more or less than the visa application and the cost of the visa application. And whether or not it is granted or denied, the American government still incurs the cost of processing the visa application. I do agree that sometimes it can be perhaps frustrating that if you don't get the visa and you pay the fee, but do understand that, again, the cost is there for every visa application, and we take each application very seriously and we give it due consideration in each individual case. We never deny or grant visas on a whim. They are done based on American law and what the consular officer sees and hears during the visa interview.
Now, Elliot, there are concerns that there are agents who actually block the visa appointment slots, and people are unable to get dates unless they pay these agents. I'm sure you may have heard this. What's the embassy doing about that?
We are always engaged in efforts to make sure that the appointment process is fair for everyone. And, I will say that I know that sometimes it can be hard to get a visa appointment. And honestly, the reason for that is just very high demand. I said this before, but the amount of people who paid the visa application fee in general tripled between 2019 and 2023. And so there is just a lot of demand out there for visa applications, and we are doing everything we can to meet the demand. But obviously, we're not going to be able to interview everyone who wants a visa interview. So the best advice I can give is to plan ahead. Do it as far in advance as possible. And that way, your chances of being able to get the visa interview in time will increase.
Yeah, but Elliot, the challenge really is, so for instance, for an applicant for a student visa, you first of all should be able to, you get the admission, you get the source of funding. By the time you get the admission, get the source of funding, and you're applying, the day that you need or the date that you want is unavailable. And there are persons who say, I can give you this date, pay me $500, pay me $1,000. And so that's what people are talking about, how the embassy intends to deal with these issues.
Well, I can say, first of all, that the person who's making you those promises is probably lying, because no one has access to the visa appointment calendar on any sort of special basis. And that if you give someone your money to do a visa appointment for you or any other part of the visa application process, you are probably going to be ripped off. Second, people who pay money to evade the system or to engage in fraud are violating the law, both American law and Ghanaian law. And I can tell you that there have been cases, even in the past month, where visa applicants and visa fixers have been arrested and sent to court. So you are engaging in a very risky proposition if you hire a visa broker, if you engage in fraud, and if you are a visa broker yourself. All I can tell you is that we are looking for you, we are hunting you, and we are working with the Ghanaian police to make sure that you cannot rip off visa applicants here.
All right, Elliot. Now, there's a quick question, because on the issue of comments that are not favorable to the United States on social media, probably being used to disqualify your application, is that not curtailing free speech? The United States is a promoter of free speech. So how does that get to affect my ability to go to the United States?
When we are looking at someone's social media profile, we are looking for their eligibility for the visa and whether or not they qualify. We are not evaluating their speech in general. We are simply looking at whether or not there's anything there that would indicate you were not eligible for the visa. So we are very much engaged in simply making sure that people who come to the United States do not pose a danger. And of course, we all know that the vast majority of Ghanaians do not. They are coming for legitimate travel. They are coming for tourism, to study. And as I've said several times, if they follow the rules, they are very welcome in my country.
But Elliot,
anyway,
finally, because when I asked this question earlier, you told us that. So I asked clearly that if I posted unfavorable comments, for instance, if I supported other persons who were against U.S. interests, for instance, could that affect me? And you said it could, and that's why I followed it up with a question: are you not curtailing free speech? Because
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. Every case is evaluated individually. Anyway, I've got to go interview some applicants. So I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I really appreciate the chance to come on the air and make sure that Ghanaians understand the truth about the American visa process. Again, if you intend to follow the rules, please apply, please come, we welcome you.
All right, thank you very much, Elliot Fertig, who is Consul General of the U.S. Embassy here in Ghana, speaking to us on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM.
Yo, Я hocking and some no about bit me at the comments about comment section. Measure I can kind of at the amount of them. I will say, aha, Ghanatube so in some echo by or my Ghana. Nina no on sa Ebeka on subscribe nothing so found sa a mere notification bell no so send your bear and send no ye the 2 man up when you know 8 pass. Sisi adie, macram.